Hello and welcome to this edition of Inside Tacoma. I'm your host, Randall Lewis. Our guest for our conversation today, City Council member Ryan Mello. Welcome back.
Thanks, Randy.
I know recently you were in Yakima, because I was in Yakima with you, for Association of Washington Cities meeting. And I mean, that's certainly not an exotic locale for council members to travel to. Yakima, the Palm Springs of the Pacific Northwest, it says on the sign as you go into Yakima. But was that what goes on in something like that? You're on the board of the AWC, which in my job with the city, I've worked with, closely supported, and fought with, all at the same time in many legislative sessions. But what do you think the city of Tacoma, a city of 210,000 folks, gets out of an association that also has members that are the size of Krupp, which is the smallest city in Washington at 57 people?
You know your trivia. I'm always amazed. What's great about the Association of Washington Cities is all 281 cities in Washington are represented, and so certainly we're one of the very larger ones. And so because we're a larger city, we have a seat on the board. It's a really important venue to talk about issues that are pretty universal to all cities. So I think it's really helpful when we're able to go down in a unified voice to Olympia and speak to our state government about what the needs are for all cities. Whether that be support for infrastructure dollars, certainly retaining local control and making sure that we're able to make laws locally and not have the state tell us what to do on everything. So that's what we mean by local controls, and making sure we protect our ability to be locally led. There's some things that are universal like that I think the Association of Washington Cities plays a very strong voice. And then that allows people like you on our behalf to go into Olympia and talk about the really specific Tacoma things that are good for Tacoma, and there's other things that are more broad brush.
And yet there were also, in this past recent legislative session, there was an issue that kind of divided some cities that I know was controversial for AWC, and that is the Voting Rights Act, which is something that the city of Tacoma has supported. It's a matter of whether or not people are adequately represented on elected bodies of city councils and school districts. And the legislation has been pending in Olympia for a long time. We've always supported it. And AWC had members who were on the other side of that question and kind of tried to walk a very, very fine line on that.
Yeah, it's a good example of where the AWC board disagreed. There was a very robust conversation about what the position of the AWC board should be. Certainly Tacoma strongly supports voting rights and making sure that there's better access and equal access to the ballot box for everybody. Especially folks who are historically disenfranchised. So Tacoma weighed in very heavily and worked very hard with the prime sponsors, and I'm really proud that we did. And I think that's why our voice at AWC is so important. I think we really helped move the conversation a little bit, but there's often disagreement within the city family.
Right, and there was another one where we were on the opposite side, and I'll just throw it out. It was also during this session, there was a bill regarding Point Ruston that would have allowed Tacoma to annex the Ruston side of Point Ruston development. AWC adamantly opposed that legislation, which in the end didn't pass, but had the positive effect that Tacoma was hoping for, right?
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so the association has that value, and it is kind of remarkable that a place like Krupp with 57 people and Seattle with 700,000 people are in the same association, and because there is so much diversity between the 281 cities in Washington State.
Yep.
So moving on, you also represent the city of Tacoma on some other boards and commissions, and I know one of those is Pierce Transit. This is going to be an exciting time for Pierce Transit. I mean, a very big project that's being paid for by Sound Transit, but kind of a very big project that Pierce Transit will operate is coming in what's known as bus rapid transit, something very new to this region. Yeah.
So it's a very exciting time for Pierce Transit. Ridership is up about 15% across the board, and that's largely due to the recent redesign. So routes were redesigned to be more efficient, to track where there's actually high ridership and the potential for more ridership, making sure that those routes are more straight and get folks to point A to point B in a more efficient manner. So ridership is up by 15%, and all indication is it'll continue to climb. And one of the more exciting projects is this bus rapid transit project, which will get folks from Spanaway to downtown Tacoma on what is most of Route 1 for those that ride Route 1.
Okay, so and this would replace Route 1?
It'll replace that portion of Route 1. It'll make it much easier to ride, much quicker to ride. So right now, Route 1 comes about every 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the time of day. A bus will come every 10 to 12 minutes. The buses will be more comfortable. There'll be Wi-Fi on the bus so folks can get work done on the bus. It'll travel in a designated lane just for the bus in much of the lanes of travel. The traffic lights will be synchronized, so they'll get the green light wherever they go. Boarding and onboarding will be faster. You won't be backed up to pay for the bus as you get on. You'll pay before you get on the bus. So there's a whole host of things that will make the travel quicker, easier, and more convenient. So I'm really, really excited about it. And so the Pierce Transit Board just made a decision to pick what's called the mode. So the mode here being bus rapid transit, and the alignment. So the alignment being Spanaway to downtown Tacoma, Market Street, and South 9th is the other end of the terminus. So the next step is going to the federal government to apply for a grant called the Small Starts Grant. So we'll do that in September and go through that process, because that's where we envision getting the other half of the capital construction cost to pull this off.
All right. Now, this isn't nearly as expensive as, say, extending light rail, which is something else that's beginning to happen right now in Tacoma. But there is some infrastructure costs in terms of platforms and things like that, because as I understand how this works is there won't be any steps to go up to the bus. These new buses will be platform level and make it easier for people in wheelchairs or anybody to get in and off of them. And they'll be the articulated buses, right?
Exactly. So there'll be larger articulated buses. They'll be at platform, so folks with a bike or a wheelchair or other mobility issues can get on and off much more safely and quickly. You don't have to, if you're taking a bike, you don't have to put the bike on the front of the bus and deal with that. Your bike can easily get into the bus. So all these different things make for a much better ride for everybody.
All right. And if all goes well, when would we see this kind of service begin?
If all goes well, I think we're going to see service in 2021, 2022, if we stay on schedule.
Okay. Meantime, it's not part of Sound Transit 3 like Bus Rapid Transit is, but Sound Transit 2, which is the extension of the Link Light Rail, sometimes transit things take a while, is beginning. We're starting to see the utility relocations that have to go because we're going to put rail in the street. Yeah.
So this summer, folks are going to see utilities being pulled out from in the middle of the street where there are utilities, gas lines and water and sewer lines. So that's the first phase of the construction. So from Old City Hall, up Stadium Way, around Stadium High School, up to Martin Luther King Jr. Way, down in front of all of the hospitals to South 19th Street and Martin Luther King Jr. Way. That's the alignment. And so this first phase is pulling all of the utilities out from the middle of the street. And then the next phase will be putting in rail line.
Wow. So, and that's, the schedule for that.
It's about a 3-year construction period.
It does take a while. As I recall, it's been a while since we've experienced this because the existing Link Light Rail was built quite a while ago and has been operating ever since. And so will this still be free? Is the extension still supposed to be free? And that's paid for partially by the business improvement area in downtown Tacoma.
Currently, the Sound Transit Board policy is once the extension happens, then paid service would happen similar to the rest of the Sound Transit system. So there's no other Sound Transit system that does not pay a fare. Every other mode of Sound Transit service pays some sort of a fare. So that's what I understand to be the policy of the Sound Transit Board is once the extension is complete, a fare will start.
Oh, okay. So one of the other things that I know that you have been active with the City Council as a whole recently is some changes at Tacoma Public Utilities. Now, there's a utility board that does oversee some day-to-day activities of the utilities, but the big decisions all are made by the City Council: adoption of the budget, adoption of rates, confirmation of the directors, hiring, appointment of board members. That's all City Council authority. And so we've had both of those things. Recently, we had a new board member and we have a new director of the utilities. So that's the council spent quite a bit of time. There's been quite a few joint meetings with the utility board I've seen on your calendar. And they seem to be some of those even continuing out into the future. So Is that kind of a part of a thing that maybe if we met together more often and talked to each other a little more often, that things move a little easier? Because there are some big decisions like the future of Click that are still kind of pending on.
Yeah, I think these joint meetings have been very productive. We're having the detailed conversations that the policymaking bodies need to have, building a relationship with each other so we can better understand the perspectives of the respective policymaking bodies. So there's very important decisions coming forward, but I think the selection of the utility board director is a good one. We've met often. The council was very clear to the board about the qualities, skills, and background we were looking for in a director. And we had lots of opportunity to communicate that to the utility board and to communicate the kind of selection we wanted to see them come before the city council for confirmation. And I think they delivered. And I think in large part that's because of the more intentional relationship building and council being really clear about what we were desiring in a future director.
All right. So the new director going to be given some time to get her feet on the ground before he has to face the Click decisions, or is that something that's still going to happen relatively soon here?
Well, I think she's going to jump headfirst into a lot of decisions. She gets here August 1st. We're very excited for her. The current interim director,
Linda McRae,
has just been fantastic, and she has a lot of trust and confidence of the current city council, and is setting up the new director very nicely. So, but Jackie Flowers, the new director, is going to walk in the middle, or possibly the tail end of a process to decide the future of Click, in the middle of budget development process, rates process, in addition to just figuring out where the bathroom is and where all of these facilities throughout the South Sound are that Tacoma Public Utilities owns and operates for the betterment of Tacoma.
Right. So yeah, it is a big job, and the first woman permanent director. I mean, Linda McRae was the first woman director of TPU as the former water superintendent, and as you said, someone I think extremely well known in the community, and had the instant support from the staff at TPU as well as general government at the city.
Yep. She's given a great amount of service to the city, and we're very grateful.
Right, that she came out of retirement to take that big job for a few months. Okay,
Yep.
So those are all kinds of big issues that kind of involve other bodies, boards sometimes that you either help appoint or serve on yourself. But there are some issues that you just get to tackle on your own that are kind of confronting the city right now, and it seems to be kind of a confluence of some of them occurring in one particular part of the city, and that's the Tide Flats. And we'll start with the Northwest Detention Center, because that has become kind of a regional attraction for folks to voice their opinions regarding what's happening at that facility, but also kind of as a metaphor for national immigration policy. And the city's doesn't operate that facility. The city can't make that facility go away, and has been trying to support people's right to protest at the same time and keep them safe.
Yeah, it's a very tough issue. I recently had the opportunity to go down and visit. There was so much conversation over the years about it. I really wanted to put my own eyes on the facility and get a tour of it to really get a sense. And it's an incredibly sobering place, and I learned a great deal. Unfortunately, we have very, very limited impact on national immigration policy. Certainly, we make our voices known and take those voices to our federal delegation and to DC and communicate that. But we have little to do with that. But I think we need a better national immigration policy. Meanwhile, we're trying to hold the current facility accountable for treatment of the residents in the detention facility, and doing what we can. And also, someone like me doesn't believe that is a detention facility that currently houses 1,300 residents. Just don't think that it's an appropriate place for 1,300 residents to be in the middle of the Port Maritime Industrial Center. That just doesn't make any sense to me. This should be job-creating land for manufacturing and industrial and trade-dependent uses, and not detaining individuals. So it's a very tough issue, and it's land use and policy all wrapped in together.
And it's also people remember the history of the site. It's a Superfund site. I mean, it was capped but still, it's had a legacy of decades of pollution, and housing folks on it is an odd use.
Yeah, it's odd is putting it, I think, gracefully. I think the other difficult thing, there's lots of difficult things about the current facility. Its location is one of many. So individuals do get released after they're determined that they should be released properly. They get released every week. Several individuals do, and they're in the middle of a industrial area with no bus line, no sidewalks, no sense of how to get to a place to get a meal or find their family. It's in the middle of a highly industrial area. So for all kinds of reasons, it's a very frustrating experience, and why the previous city council years ago thought this was a good job creating endeavor is beyond me.
So people who are picked up from various places around the region in Tacoma and outside of Tacoma aren't taken back to the places where they were picked up when they're released. They just open the gates and send them out onto the street out there.
Correct.
In a place they may or may not know anything about.
Correct. Miles from any civilization, right? Any place to go eat something or find services and transition or find their family. It's a tough spot.
Now, the city has taken some steps that it is within its ability to do. We decided that we are a welcoming city in terms of immigration. We've set up a task force on immigration affairs, and created a kind of a seed fund that people can contribute to provide for defense for people, because people held in an immigration facility are not entitled necessarily to lawyers, and so this provides some funds for that purpose. Is there more that you think the city can do? Obviously, we can't change federal immigration policy, but is there more that the city could be stepping up to do?
So we turned the Immigration and Refugee Task Force into a permanent commission, which is great. And I think what we're going to be looking at doing is listening very closely to the Commission on Immigration and Refugee Affairs, hearing what more they think that we can do. I think there's all sorts of strategies to make our community more and more welcoming of immigrants and refugees. How can we continue to encourage them to be entrepreneurs and successful business owners, helping them to gain access to important services to integrate and find the services they need to be, really safe and productive citizens and included very welcomely here. So I think there's going to be all kinds of strategies that are really practical strategies that are going to come from the Commission on Immigration, Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, and I think we're going to, a strong majority of the council is very committed to implementing those ideas. Okay.
The other issue that kind of bubbles up in the area of the tide flats is kind of its future. Obviously, we have a deep water port, so container shipping is going to continue to be a very important part of the future of the tide flats in Tacoma, operated by the Northwest Seaport Alliance, which is an operation between the Port of Tacoma and Port of Seattle. But there's other lands owned by the port by itself, not part of the alliance, and there's other lands owned by private development. A lot of that is used for fossil fuels these days. That's not likely to change anytime even if the city does adopted a sub-area plan tomorrow, which it won't because it takes about 3 years to do something like that. Those facilities are going to be here for a while. They're here, they have a right to exist and continue to exist. So this isn't about today, it's about, really this planning idea is really about the future.
Yep, that's really well said. It's by state law, someone who's already in place with their current facility of any kind is vested and gets to stay in place. So this isn't, like you said, this isn't about today's facilities. It's about planning for the next 30 to 50 years of this really important economic area for our city. So that's what I'm really charging us to think about. I am a huge proponent of keeping our port for the movement of household goods and agricultural products, how important it is as we're the most trade-dependent state in the union. So I think it's incredibly important that we preserve our lands for trade-dependent uses. which is a really important part of our economy. I do not think that we should be a fossil fuel gateway in the Pacific. I don't think it's good for job creation here. I don't think it's good for our health and for the future of our environment. So I think we need to promote and develop our lands for the movement of household goods and agricultural products, and really preserve that land for those purposes.
All right, and so this is when this process begins, which will be presumably sometime here in 2018. It will obviously be a public process, like all city land use plan developments are. There'll be lots of public hearings, lots of input, lots of decisions at the far end by both the Planning Commission and the City Council at public hearings. So this is all done openly and in sunshine.
Yeah, absolutely. There'll be a lot of public meetings. I think people will get tired of all the public meetings, but I think they'll be for the better. There'll be stakeholder groups, there'll be commission meetings, advisory groups all along the way. But yeah, a multi-year process. I'm a little disappointed that it's taken us so long. So at this time, we still don't have a process started. So I'm really urging us to kick off this process. I was hopeful that we could have done this a year ago, but so really trying to charge our partners. We're really trying to do this in partnership with the Port of Tacoma and the Puyallup Tribe of Indians. And I really hope that we can figure out what the next steps are and get to work, because the future of our economy and our quality of life really depend upon it.
And the result of this isn't the first sub-area plan, as they're called in planner speak, that the city's done. It actually would be about the fourth or fifth. And the others we've done have already resulted in announcements of new development, new jobs, new tax investment, all sorts of things. South Downtown, where the work hasn't begun yet, but we know of a variety of projects in the old brewery district, which I always used to laugh at that name, but now it's actually going to be a brewery district again, with some of these things that are going on down there. We'll see that was one of the very first sub-area plans we did. Further south in the downtown, the Dome district, there's a lot of development, including lots of new housing that's going to be coming out of the ground soon in that area. That was another sub-area plan. And the most recent one that was finished was the Tacoma Mall. Mm-hmm. And it was within days of that the Tacoma Mall's ownership, a national corporation not even based here, announced a major reinvestment of the Tacoma Mall. Yeah. That's in line with that plan. Mm-hmm.
There's lots of upsides. In the South Downtown sub-area plan is a really detailed, deep dive in a particular area of downtown. Really did pay off. It's a great example. Several investors have communicated to us that they've trimmed off about 18 months in their development process. In large part because during the deep dive of the planning process, you do environmental review for traffic impacts and what are the utilities needed that need to be upgraded. Do you need larger water pipes or larger sewer pipes, and who's going to pay for it and when? All of that analysis happens during the planning process, as opposed to the regular development processes. You do that site by site by site. It's very inefficient, it's very costly, and you're just redoing this analysis over and over again. It's just mind-boggling. So doing the deep dive for the entire area and answering all those questions at once has proven to shave off about 18 months of the development process, which gets job creation and opportunities for the future of our city much quicker.
And it is kind of as you say, a very development friendly process, but it's also done in public. Mm-hmm. So it's all done with the public process that we normally follow with planning, and it does kind of lead to some great successes. But some of that success is occurring now because Tacoma has become an attractive place within the region for development, because prices are lower here than they are in places in King County. Now that in itself is leading to some disruption in the community in terms of tenants being evicted. The most famous case, the Tiki Apartments. But that's not the only place where this is being affected. Are you concerned at all about I don't know if this is gentrification, but are you concerned about gentrification of Tacoma?
I'm not so concerned about gentrification. I am concerned about displacement, certainly. I don't think that areas of town that are currently affordable should only remain affordable because they're not as great places to live, because they have higher crime rates, or the schools are worse, or the neighborhood is not as walkable or attractive. that should not be the indicator of whether or not a neighborhood in our city is affordable or not. So I think we need to figure out how to grow and improve our community and limit displacement. So folks should not be displaced simply because a neighborhood gets infused with transportation options, better streets, sidewalks, better schools, safer neighborhoods, better parks. That kind of investment should not drive people away. We got to figure out how to improve our neighborhoods and allow everyone of all incomes to be able to live in those neighborhoods.
So you've taken some steps towards protection of some folks who've been displaced. Do you think the council will do some more in that area?
I think there's going to be a lot of conversation about how to protect tenants. Certainly, I think there's going to be a lot more policies rolled out about how to protect tenants. I think that the council is going to be very, very busy over the next year or so around affordable housing policies. How do we create mixed income neighborhoods, right? So folks of all incomes can live in a neighborhood, and how we can grow and develop our neighborhoods to be great places to live, and not just the really wealthy, neighborhoods getting all the amenities. So that's going to be a really big conversation for us. How do we develop and grow, provide great neighborhoods, and allow folks to be able to afford to stay there of all incomes.
All right. Well, it sounds like some things we'll need to check back with you on the next time you're here. So thank you for being our guest today.
Thanks, Randy.
Our guest has been City Council member Ryan Mello. We look forward to seeing you next time here on Inside Tacoma.